I'm Jay Moran.
I'm Bridget Jaipal Valenza.
I'm Thomas O'Neill White.
I'm Angela Preston.
We need to get together and let our voices be heard.
This is What's Next, a dedicated hour to have important conversations about the issues facing the marginalized and underrepresented communities of Western New York and Southern Ontario.
If we're going to have some real healing, we've got to have space to tell some uncomfortable truth.
What's Next continues our mission to discuss race,
Equity,
And the common concerns of Buffalo's East Side and beyond.
In the suburban area, everywhere, we must work and teach our children.
And good morning. Welcome to What's Next. In this hour, we're going to be talking about an unheralded leader in the fight for racial justice in this country, Franklin H. Williams. Franklin H. Williams Judicial Commission is here in New York State. Its executive director is Mary Lynn Nicolas-Brewster, and she joins us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure to have you. I said it, unheralded Franklin H. Williams. That's one way of saying it, but I would have to say for a majority of New Yorkers, maybe even unknown, right?
Correct. Franklin H. Williams is an unknown figure. I'll just tell you a little bit about
Please.
this amazing individual. Ambassador Williams was a founder of the Peace Corps, co-organizer of the Peace Corps. He was a civil rights leader. He worked alongside of Thurgood Marshall as a special assistant. So he was in the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, working alongside of Thurgood Marshall, arguing cases before the U.S. Supreme Court, again, to advance the cause of civil rights. He argued cases against segregation. He argued cases against discrimination in jury selection, even before the Supreme Court decided, its famous case in Batson versus Kentucky. We had Ambassador Williams arguing successfully that juries should be diverse and that there shouldn't be discrimination in the selection of jurors.
So that's quite a contribution right there. I mean, to think that there was a time that wasn't part of the process.
Correct. And there was a part of a time where, people could be struck from a jury just because of their race or gender or national origin, etc. So he was arguing those cases successfully. He also was co-organizer of the Peace Corps. He was not only a local figure in New York, he was also a national figure because he also worked in the NAACP in California. He was very successful there in advancing the cause of housing, against housing discrimination. So he was very successful in the western part of the country. And then he was also important here in New York State. And then internationally, he was appointed as ambassador to Ghana. And as I mentioned, he was co-organizer of the Peace Corps. So much impact that he had that annually the Peace Corps has an award in his honor, because that's how much of an impact he made, not only in New York, in the nation, but also internationally.
It's interesting about Franklin Williams also that he was named to, in essence, be the person who oversaw the initial New York State Commission on when it came to judicial fairness. Did such work that after he was done, they named the commission after him.
Correct. So in 1988, again, the then Chief Judge Sol Wackler had heard about Franklin Williams, had heard about all of the things that he had done, and knew the kind of person he was. He was considered a bridge figure, someone who could bring people together in a room, have conversations, really get them to know each other. And he wanted someone like that, someone who was well known, someone who was well respected. Again, as I mentioned, his history.
Sure.
And he wanted him to do a review of the New York State court system, because at that time, Chief Judge Sol Wackler was really concerned at the lack of diversity within the court system. And he wanted to know, well, how can we improve? What can we do? So he tasked Ambassador Williams to do this study. So in 1991, after 4 years of doing this in-depth study of the court system, a report was issued detailing the circumstances in the court system that really, again, really shook the court system when it was the publication came out. It showed that there was a lack of diversity in judicial positions as well as the non-judicial workforce. They showed a lack of diversity within the upper echelons, the supervisory positions, and it showed that there were two systems of justice.
Okay.
Right? There was a system of justice for the poor and for people of color, and a system of justice for those who were white and were affluent, right? So the courts that were being frequented by people of color, by the poor, were often the courts that were overburdened, under-resourced, housing court, criminal court, family court, and those courts were not getting the resources that they needed. Also, people who were coming into the courts were not being treated, the way they should, with the respect and dignity that they should be treated with. So he put that all in a report, and as I mentioned, it really shook the court system into changing the way it does things, right? So one of the things that as soon as this report was issued, maybe within, I think it was issued in April, by June, the then chief judge made this commission a permanent part of the New York State court system in June of 1991. And the idea was they wanted a commission that was dedicated to promoting racial and ethnic fairness within the courts, ensuring that Ambassador Williams's legacy, which is to ensure equal justice in the courts, was going to take place.
So these commission conversations, they're ongoing even to this day?
Even to this day. So let me talk a little bit about the
Please.
commission. The commission is made up of 28 diverse members from throughout the state, so it is a statewide commission. In fact, it was the first such commission ever in the United States. So New York was a leader in this regard. So once the commission members, they meet monthly, we discuss the issues, we meet with the court leadership, we serve as an advisor to the court system on issues of race, of issues of justice, social justice, and so we do that monthly, where we meet and we advance the cause in different ways.
Okay.
In different ways. We have two co-chairs. Right now, we have the Honorable Troy K. Weber, who is an Associate Justice of the Appellate Division First Department, and our co-chair also is Honorable Richard Rivera of Albany.
Okay.
So he was recently actually appointed as statewide coordinating judge of family court matters. So he was our co-chair, and so we really have a downstate and an upstate approach to make sure that we are addressing issues on a statewide level.
Is there a substantial difference? I mean, from your perspective, yeah?
I think, everything it depends on local,
Okay.
What is happening locally. So what we had done in the past as a commission is create advisory groups for each of our judicial districts. So in New York State, we have 13 judicial districts. And so as I, mentioned, there are differences. What's happening in New York City is different from what's happening, say, here in Buffalo.
Right.
So we want to make sure that we're addressing the issues that are, happening within the judicial district. So we have these advisory groups. These are attorneys, judges, people in the local community to tell us, well, what's going on in your community? How can we address the issues that are going on in your community? So we would fashion we would look into how we would address those issues based on what the local individuals, those community individuals were saying was needed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, and when you say those individuals, I mean, also would it be, just somebody who had time in the courtroom, whether they were a plaintiff, a defendant, or whatever the case may be, their concerns are funneling their way through the system as well?
Definitely. One of the things that we would like to see more of is more feedback from, our court users.
Okay.
Right. So we do have in different districts surveys where the court users, like you said, plaintiffs, defendants, those who are using the courts, can give feedback. How we doing? What are their thoughts as to how they're being treated in the courts, how their cases, advancing in the courts, are they, when they approach the courts, are they being treated with dignity, with respect, et cetera. So we do want to hear from court users. But one of the things that the Williams Commission has done is also reached out to stakeholders. I'll just talk a little bit about our family court report that we just issued earlier this year. So the goal of our commission is to address racism and bias in the courts, to advance justice within the courts. So 30 years ago, Franklin H. Williams was issuing a report in 1991 addressing what the issues were in the courts at that time. In 2020, Secretary Jay Johnson, who was the former Homeland Secretary of Homeland Security under the Obama administration, was tasked to do the exact same thing. He was asked to do a review of the court system, and he found, similar to Franklin H. Williams, that there were still many issues. Yes, we had made advances, we had more diverse workforce, but we still needed to do more. And he actually issued 13 recommendations to address those concerns, right? Including more resources, more transparency within the court system. Transparency.
How would that?
Meaning statistics. You know, so for example, within the last few years, there's more publicly available information on the court website with demographic data on the judges, on the judicial workforce, right? So with more transparency, we'll know whether or not we're achieving the goal of diversity. Also, with respect to, just the kinds of goals that we have, right, in terms of how do we advance, how do we promote within the court system? People need to know, like, well, exactly what does that look like? So we as the commission have also done programs to make that process more transparent. So, if you want to promote within the court system, we have done what's called a Professional Development Academy, where we have created an academy, a workshop, a 2-day intensive workshop where non-judicial staff can attend this 2-day workshop and learn skills, learn how to write a resume, a cover letter, how to interview. So all of this to help advance them within the court system. We're making that more transparent. We also did a program on demystifying the hiring process. Again, making that more transparent. So that's one of the things that, was discussed, transparency. But another thing that was discussed was also similar to what Franklin Williams found 30 years ago, was our family courts, our housing courts, our criminal courts. Again, overburdened, under-resourced, right? So we decided we would meet with stakeholders, we would meet with family court judges, we would, learn from them and then issue our own family court report to detail, well, what are some of the recommendations? Because that's part of our mission as well. Our mission is not only to, again, advance diversity within the court system, it's also to address some of those, concerns that were raised 30 years ago with Ambassador Williams's report.
Our guest this morning on What's Next is Mary Lynn Nicolas-Brewster. She's the executive director of the Franklin H. Williams Judicial Commission, and we're talking about Mr. Williams, who, by the way, just yesterday, October 22nd, what is 106th birthday?
It would have been his 106th birthday, and so we're very proud of that. And this week, actually, in honor of his 106th birthday, we are planning several programs in Buffalo. Tomorrow we will be meeting. One of the things that we do also is we meet with administrative judges throughout the state to discuss, the diversity and other causes that are important to the court system, as I mentioned, locally, because we address local issues. So we'll be doing that. We'll be meeting with the administrative judge. We will be hosting red carpet event. So let me talk a little bit about what we did a few years ago with WNED, Toronto Public Media, who has been an excellent partner of the Franklin H. Williams Judicial Commission. We produced a documentary on the life of Franklin H. Williams. It's titled A Bridge to Justice, The Life of Franklin H. Williams. And so it's a 26-minute PBS documentary, an award-winning documentary. It received a Silver Telly Award. It was nominated for a New York Emmy, and it's narrated by Emmy Award-winning actor Sterling K. Brown. And it's a 26-minute documentary on this amazing individual who really is a beacon of justice, right? And so along with that, we created an educational curriculum. Right? We know that Franklin H. Williams is a hidden figure. A lot of people who are listening today don't know who he is, don't know, the impact that he had not only on the state, but on the nation and internationally. So we thought it would be important to create a curriculum that would be accessible to teachers from around the nation, and they could incorporate, his documentary and the curriculum within their school curriculum. So we did that with the help of WNED, Toronto Public Media. So that curriculum is available on PBS Learning Media. And along with that, we created a student perspectives video. So the goal is to get young people excited about Franklin H. Williams and all that he had done, but also to get them excited about being civically engaged, using their voice to make a difference. So we thought, okay, let's hear from the students. Let's have them view the documentary, work with them on the curriculums, have them do the discussions, questions, and do all of that with the curriculum. And then we would do recorded interviews with the students, getting their perspective on who Franklin Williams was, what impact he had, and what impact he has even on current today, right? How does he impact today? And I think one of the key things is that he's a bridge figure. Right? And I mentioned earlier, the name of the documentary is A Bridge to Justice. And we talk a lot about bridge figures, about individuals who can bring people together, get them in a room, get them, talking about what the issues are so that we can all move forward towards the cause of justice. And he did that very well, Franklin Williams. And that's what he did throughout his life. So one of the things that the students would talk about, not only are they learning the importance of voting, the importance of jury service, again, being part of the whole being civic-minded, but they learned that it's important to have conversations with people. Right?
Okay.
Having conversations with all people, right? So I think that was one of the biggest lessons, if you hear the Student Perspectives video, is that it's important to have dialogue. It's important to reach out to all people because, this is not a solitary issue. Racism and bias is not, an issue only for people of color. It's for all people. Right. So, again, even Martin Luther King said, right, it's important, if justice is not being served one place, it's not being served at all. So we all are together in this. We all are connected in ensuring, justice is done. So I think one of the things that the students learned in watching this is the importance of conversation, of dialogue, of relationships with others.
I think the idea that he would have been 106 yesterday brings a lot of things to mind. But the one that stands out is he came of age at a time where people of color, obviously, opportunities were limited in many ways, but most certainly in the legal field. Have you ever considered what he had to endure to get to where he got?
He had to endure a lot. If you watch the documentary, you'll see, what he had to endure in certain, because at that time it was, there was segregation, right? There wasn't what we have today, where we have the ability to, go to any school we'd like, or we can go on to public accommodations. He didn't have that. So he struggled with that because he saw that was unjust. And he was a kind of person that really, changed him. I mean, he really, I guess it was during his college days, because he went to Lincoln University. And if you watch the documentary, he went alongside, because Thurgood Marshall also went to Lincoln University and others, and he really learned the importance of justice while he was there. He learned that it's important to advance the cause of justice. But I think when he was younger, he was really hurt. There were times where he could not go into a certain setting because of the color of his skin. And that was just inconceivable to him. So he spent his life saying, no, that's wrong. We should be able to, get rid of these laws that would prohibit, blacks and whites and people of color and whites from engaging in, community. That's basically what it was. We weren't able to be a community because we had these laws that segregated us.
When we think about the battle for civil rights, we think so often about the 60s and protests and freedom riders, which of course are all key critical. But as we're talking about someone like Franklin Williams or Thurgood Marshall, how important also it was to get into the legal elements of things, right? Without those changes, we would be back where we were 50, 60 years ago.
It was important to, yeah, exactly. And they used the legal system to advance the cause of civil rights. But if you watch the documentary, you'll also see how Thurgood Marshall and Ambassador Williams, they had different thoughts about how to go about that.
Really?
Whereas Thurgood Marshall was a little bit more cautious, right? Because he wanted to make sure, if you watch a documentary, he wanted to make sure that any case that he presented before the U.S. Supreme Court, that he was sure he was going to win that case. Because he understood that if there was a situation where he presented a case in the Supreme Court and he lost, that could, as you mentioned, push this cause backwards.
Right.
Whereas Franklin Williams was a little bit more like, no, we need to really push this ahead. So they had a difference of opinion, but the goal ultimately was, again, to use the court system to advance justice. But they had a little bit of a different, view of how to do that. Thurgood Marshall was a little bit more cautious.
A little more cautious.
Yes.
And Mr. Williams was a little more aggressive, perhaps.
A little bit more aggressive. But, Thurgood Marshall had his view of it. And I think he was right, that he wanted to make sure that those cases that he presented to the U.S. Supreme Court, they would win, and they would get that support from the U.S. Supreme Court. And then as opposed to maybe having a setback.
Yeah, it's a fascinating way of presenting that, because it shows that nothing's monolithic, right? Just because they work together, right? Marshall and Williams work together, but differing points of view, differing tactics.
Correct. But the one thing that both of them, I think, really agreed upon was the importance of, again, being a bridge figure, being a person who can connect people. And that was very important to Franklin Williams.
Do you consider, whether it's Franklin Williams, like you said, maybe at the top, most people don't know. More people obviously know Thurgood Marshall, of course. But is this an overlooked part of the conversation when it comes to racial justice? The people who are inside that legal community, whether they're attorneys or judges or whatever, how important they are to making sure that things continue to advance.
I think that it's not an overlooked part of it, because our commission is there. We have a new chief judge who is committed to these issues as well. Not to say that the court system has been committed over the last 30 years and has been pushing the cause, but the commission has been very good at educating, bringing awareness of these issues to the entire court system. So that's one of our part of our mission, is to do that. So we will do programs throughout the state on different issues, again, on racism and bias. We've, on different issues that impact the community. We did one recently on the family courts, how to become a family court judge. That's important, because we want to, again, we want our family courts to be strong. We want individuals to be interested in becoming a family court judge. We've done programs recently we did a Juneteenth program, and, we, again, are bringing to bear issues of race within the court system. So we do this annually. We bring awareness to different issues. So the court system is very clear, especially with Secretary Jay Johnson's report of the work that we need to do. And we do town halls. Our commission, we do town halls with the court community. So we're hearing from the actual court employees, what their concerns are. Earlier you mentioned, hearing from litigants. We also hear from our court employees. We're going to be having a town hall in a couple of weeks, and it's a virtual town hall, but the entire legal community as well as the court community comes on and asks questions of our court administrators. What are you doing to advance this cause? And it's a dialogue, and we definitely are clear that we need to do this work.
We're talking about Franklin H. Williams in this hour of What's Next. Our guest this morning is Mary Lynn Nicolas-Brewster. She's the executive director of the Franklin H. Williams Judicial Commission. We're talking about a lot of issues. We're going to get into some of those coming up. This is What's Next on WBFO.
Did you know that WNED PBS is always working on great new local shows for you to watch? Documentaries like Kleinhand's Gift to Buffalo, which tells the story of Buffalo's music hall.
The hall is very intimate, and that intimacy makes everyone who comes in here feel a part of our family.
Fun and educational series like Compact Science.
Believe it or not, peppers are technically fruits.
And Shakespeare's greatest hits, featuring some of his best-known soliloquies and monologues.
We are such stuff as dreams are made of.
You can watch them all on our website at WNED.org/local shows. While you're there, check out the show pages and mini websites for additional content such as bonus features, photo galleries, and lesson plans. Find it all at WNED.org/local shows.
Do you hear that? That's the lullaby of Broadway. Join me, Anthony Chase, on a memorable trip to New York City, January 22nd through the 26th. We'll see 5 hit Broadway shows, Kimberly Akimbo and Juliet, Back to the Future, A Beautiful Noise, and Shocked. And we'll eat at Sardi's. Transportation, hotel, and select meals are also included. Space is limited, so don't delay. Call 716-630-3731 or visit WNED.org/travel.
You're listening to What's Next, our place to discuss the important issues of our communities of Western New York and Southern Ontario. We want to hear from you. Click on the Talk to Us option in the WBFO app, and we will work to get your questions or comments on the air. Do you have a story or concern that we should be addressing? Email us using whatsnext@wbfo.org. Together we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
And welcome back to What's Next. Our guest this hour, Mary Lynn Nicolas-Brewster, Executive Director of the Franklin H. Williams Judicial Commission. Franklin H. Williams, a leader in fighting for racial justice in this country and in New York State, as a matter of fact, and that's why the Judicial Commission is named, in fact, after him as well. Mary Lynn, we were going to get into some of the issues that have been raised by Secretary Johnson's report here, and we were having a little off-mic conversation about jury duty for a second, and one of the great coincidences, actually, I was originally not going to be here today because I was scheduled to report for jury duty today, and when I made my call on Friday afternoon, I was told in weird language that I was not meant to appear, and I don't have to do it for another 6 years. But anyway, my point is, there are concerns, though. I mean, that's something we haven't really gotten into. We've been talking about some of the other overlying issues, but a jury, just a sense of jury duty and why it's important. I mean, I guess we could get into that easily enough, but there's some recommendations about this in these reports.
Excellent. Yes, definitely. One of our fundamental constitutional rights is the right to a fair and impartial jury. And, part of that is having a diverse jury. I mean, the literature is out there, the studies are out there, the importance of having diverse perspectives leading to a more just result, just jury verdict. So we want to encourage all people to know about jury service, but the importance of serving on a jury. A lot of people, they see that jury notice and they toss it out because they try to figure out how they can get out of jury service.
Right.
But you need to hold on to it. One of our commissioners, well, 2 of our commissioners are actually commissioners of jurors for their respective counties. And the importance can't be overlooked or overstated. The importance of serving on a jury, it's part of our civic duty. So one of the things that we talk a lot about at the commission is the importance of jury diversity. So our jury commissioners in each of the different counties, they ensure they do outreach, or the goal is to do outreach to the communities, because a lot of people don't realize that they need to serve on a jury, because we want different perspectives in our juries. So what we have done this week, because again, the Williams Commission is here for an entire week doing a lot of programming, and one of the programs is jury outreach.
Okay.
So we will be doing a program on Wednesday, October 25th, and it'll be discussing the importance of jury service. So we will be meeting with the local community. We will be discussing, it's our Commissioner of Jurors here in Erie County. We'll be discussing the importance of jury service, and having a diverse jury ensures our constitutional right to a fair and impartial jury.
What do we understand, though, about the obstacles to jury duty? One thing that flashes to mind, how employers need to be supportive, right? I mean, here I can say this is total, honesty. I mean, here at Buffalo Toronto Public Media, my supervisors were supportive of the fact that I might not be here Monday, or maybe for the rest of the week, whatever the case may be. But what do we hear offhand about some of the issues, some of the obstacles when it comes to making sure that we have those diverse juries?
I think there's sometimes it's not, there's a lack of an awareness of the importance of it. People don't view it as an important thing to do. They hear a lot about people trying to get out of jury service. They don't realize the impact they can make by serving on a jury. I think people just are not really clear on that. Also, sometimes you do have situations where, yes, you have a parent who may have, daycare issues, or they may have, work issues. So there might be some issues like that. But again, you have to answer the jury summons and come in and really give it an opportunity and realize that you are making an impact by serving on a jury. And I think it's a lack of, that's why we do a lot of education, lack of awareness of the importance. People hear about, voting, and they say, okay, yes, you have to vote. It's important to vote. Your vote is your voice. They don't necessarily always hear about the importance of serving on a jury. They don't look at it as important as part of their civic duty, similar to voting.
It is interesting, I guess, and maybe a little ironic that I think everybody has an opinion on when it comes to whatever case it might be, whether it's just or not.
Yeah.
But nobody really looks at it from how they could influence similar things in their community by serving on a jury.
Serving on a jury. And I think the idea is, when you're a juror, you're hearing the case. You have to have an open mind. We want jurors who are not biased. We want, unbiased jurors. And then, but you, along with other jurors, can come to a determination based on, the law that was provided to you and the facts. So you're part of that process. A lot of people, shy away from the judicial process or being in court. They're not familiar with it. It's not a comfortable scenario, so they kind of shy away from it, as opposed to really embracing it, because we've seen in the past, and again, as I mentioned, there's studies how it's important to have diverse perspectives. I'll mention, for example, Franklin Williams. He spent a lot of his time as an attorney arguing for jury diversity, because at the time, jurors could be struck because they were women or, a person of color, and so he fought against that because he knew how important it was. In fact, there was a case called the Groveland Four, and these were 4 young black men in Groveland, Florida, and Franklin Williams was representing them, and they were wrongly accused of raping a white woman, and they were wrongfully convicted by an all-white jury, right? And at that time, again, there were similar stories being told or happening, throughout the country, because, again, there were not diverse perspectives on the jury. Those young men have since been, exonerated, right, posthumously. But again, he was arguing for the importance of jury diversity. And so we continue to advance that cause. And so we do the jury outreach to make sure that people are aware of the need for that.
As you were talking about that particular case in Groveland, Florida, granted, it's historical.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, it doesn't seem like it's all that uncommon of a story to hear about cases being overturned, DNA evidence proving that, sometimes in some cases people in prison for murder charges and DNA evidence turning them over. Just from somebody who's obviously deep inside the weeds when it comes to the legal world, I mean, are we still off in this country when it comes to making sure that things are being played fairly across the board when it comes to our legal system?
I think we're doing better.
Mm-hmm.
I think, now that we have, DNA and we have all these other things that we can, maybe use that, to ensure, 30, 40 years ago, we didn't have, those similar technology. But I think definitely we're doing better because we understand now. I mean, we came from a time where, again, we had juries who weren't really looking at the evidence. They were looking at the person or maybe the person's skin color and saying, well, that person's guilty just because of the way they look. Now,
somebody accused, and this is what you couldn't be trustworthy because of the
color of your skin. Now, where, however many years later, and look, we still have bias. I mean, we are working with that. And one of the things that Secretary Jay Johnson in his report mentioned was to address jury bias because it's not like it's over. I mean, people still have implicit bias. We all do. We all have implicit biases. So one of the things that the court system has done is created a jury video. So every potential juror that comes in watches a video about implicit bias and how that can impact their decision making. So they're made aware even before they become a juror that, you know what, we all have implicit bias. Let's make sure when we're reviewing the case that we check that. We understand that that's something that everyone has. So, but before we make that decision, we step back and make sure that we're not allowing our bias to impact our decision making. So that's still there. But I think we're doing better because now we understand bias. We understand that that's something, and we're trying to ensure that we have better decision making because we have more diverse juries and we're addressing bias, potential bias in the jury.
Our guest this morning is Mary Lynn Nicolas-Brewster, Executive Director of the Franklin H. Williams Judicial Commission. It's interesting. We got probably a larger conversation about jury duty than I thought we could in this particular program. But it's interesting that some of these other recommendations or observations that came out of Secretary Johnson's report. What else? Well, I'm just curious off the top of my head. What about things like public defenders and things like that? Is that something that's come up? And I can only imagine what the burden is on those individuals in those offices.
Well, I know that within our family court report, for example, we recommended increased compensation for attorneys for the children, 18B attorneys. Again, there had been a long stretch before those attorneys, even their hourly fees were increased. And so what we were seeing was a lot of great attorneys that were representing our children, our families. They were leaving because they couldn't, again, the hourly fee they were getting was a 20-year-old fee. So they couldn't afford it. So one of the recommendations we made and the governor signed into law was that we need to increase fees for these attorneys because they're representing our most vulnerable population, our children, our families who are in need. So that was one of the things that, we as the Williams Commission thought was very important. So yes, so we do need to support those who are representing our most vulnerable population. We want to make sure that they're getting not only the financial support, but other support that they need, other resources.
It was interesting as you were describing that you said, I think you used the term 18B
right.
attorney. What is that?
Well, that's an attorney who's a private attorney who's been, part of a panel who will be asked to represent families, as opposed to maybe other attorneys who might be working for different agencies, legal aid, et cetera. So they're working for an agency, they're getting paid by that agency. Then you have 18B, where they're solo practitioner. They might be working on their own, but they get paid through the county or court system that they're working with. But they get paid a set fee.
And this is kind of a leading question, but it sounds like tremendously difficult work doing that work for the, like you said, for the most vulnerable.
Yes, I think it's and we need to honor that work, because that's important work. And again, one of the things that we as a commission, the family court is so important, because we're talking about the family system, right? Our families, really, those are the foundation of our communities. So we want to make sure that that we have enough judges for those courts to address those issues, enough attorneys representing our families and our children, and that, again, we're advancing the cause of those young, those vulnerable young people who are in our family court system and those families.
We're going to take another break and come back with our final moments with our guest this morning, Mary Lynn Nicolas-Brewster, Executive Director of the Franklin H. Williams Judicial Commission. Still plenty to talk about. Yeah. This is What's Next on WBFO.
Hey, is this thing on?
Test, 1, 2.
Sounds great. Let's go.
The podcast world is overflowing with more than 750,000 podcasts to choose from.
But for great local podcasts, you can now go to one place, the new Amplify BTPM Pods app. Here you can discover content produced in Western New York and Southern Ontario, our own backyard.
With a wide variety of genres to choose from, there is something for everyone.
Listen to the best independently produced podcasts in the region, anywhere, anytime.
Download the free Amplify BTPM Pods app wherever you get your apps and begin exploring your local podcast community now.
Explore the intersection of music and mental health with Mindful Music, hosted by mental health advocate and educator Carl Shallowhorn. Listen to guests share how they use music to express their inner nature and manage their emotional well-being. Listen to Mindful Music on Saturdays at 4 p.m. and Sundays at 8 p.m. on WBFO.
You're listening to What's Next, our place to discuss the important issues of our communities of Western New York and Southern Ontario. We want to hear from you. Click on the Talk to Us option in the WBFO app, and we will work to get your questions or comments on the air. Do you have a story or concern that we should be addressing? Email us using whatsnext@wbfo.org. Together we'll have the conversations that are needed. This is WBFO, your NPR station.
And back on What's Next, our guest, Mary Lynn Nicolas-Brewster, Executive Director of the Franklin H. Williams Judicial Commission. If you're just tuning in, Mr. Williams, the commission is named after him for his work throughout his years in the legal system, advancing racial justice. And Mary Lynn Nicolas-Brewster here with us. It's interesting, you have a quote from him that not only is a great quote, but you say it's the mission of this commission. Please read it, because it's really fascinating language that he used here, please.
Excellent. Yeah. Ambassador Franklin H. Williams put our charge very simply. He said, "We must not stop now. We have come too far to turn back. A nation that has progressed because of the sweat and blood of thousands of blacks. A nation that first tolerated slavery, then outlawed it. That accepted separate but equal as a valid constitutional concept, then rejected it. A nation that has come so far must not now give up the struggle to rid itself of racism." And that was a quote from Ambassador Franklin H. Williams. And I feel that that is the charge of the Franklin H. Williams Judicial Commission. We have come too far to turn back. And granted, we're still, working to cross that bridge to the ultimate, justice, the promised land of racial justice. But we continue and we cannot stop. So that is our charge, to be vigilant, to be diligent, and committed to advancing the cause of justice.
When we talk about the commission, it does sound like there is a very dedicated group of people who are giving their input, trying to make sure that a difference is being made. I'm going to ask you a little bit of an opinion, though, outside of the commission. You heard from your quote, Ambassador Williams saying, "We must not stop." Are there moments where you look outside and you see what's going on in the nation sometimes, and there are people who want to stop?
I think that we have seen that there's I don't want to say people, but people or maybe entities that want to roll back some of the progress that we've made. But we don't want that to happen.
Right.
We want to continue advancing the cause of justice. But yes, you'll see that, in other parts of the country, maybe multicultural education is not celebrated. Like one of the things that tomorrow we're going to be celebrating is the importance of a multicultural education, how that's important for all children, because we need to know our culture. We need to know our full history, which is one of the reasons why we have an educational curriculum on Franklin H. Williams and on others, because there's all these hidden figures that we don't know about that have advanced the cause of civil rights. So other parts of the country may be rolling some of those things back, but we have to continue pushing forward. So even if there are people who are trying to push it back, we have to advance it forward, and we have to continue moving forward across that bridge towards ultimately the land, the promised land of racial justice.
And what about the commission and the individuals on the commission? Again, obviously you must know all of them to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Do you have that sense that these are people who are committed to this mission?
Oh, they are. They are very much so. Remember, the commission members they're judges, they're lawyers, they're court administrators. Again, they have a full-time job.
Right. They got plenty on their plate.
They have plenty on their plate. And they're doing this in addition to because they are so passionate about the mission. These are individuals who have been on the commission number of years and have seen the progress over 10, 20 years, 30 years, and want to ensure that continues. So it's a very active commission. It's, again, as I mentioned, it's over 30 years old and very well regarded within the court system as well as the court community, the legal community. And we want to make sure that the public, exactly by doing this,
right,
the public is aware of not only Ambassador Williams, but the work of the Williams Commission. I would encourage anyone to really go to our website. We have a website. It's www.nycourts.gov/FHW, and you will learn more about the work of the Williams Commission and how we try to advance justice, not only in the court system, but also in our legal system. We work with law students who are seeking to join the legal profession. We do a lot of pipeline programs, as I mentioned earlier, with legal fellowships, internship programs, judicial mentorship programs. So we're trying to address all of these issues in different ways. And one of the really nice things about our commissioners is that they all are from different parts of the state. They hold different positions, so they can provide different perspectives, as we mentioned earlier, and really help us to address all of these issues in different ways.
Can you take us inside a little bit what these conversations on this commission like, without maybe necessarily giving away any kind of confidentiality or anything, but just what the texture of these conversations are? Because you're talking about people, and we're not necessarily attorneys, not necessarily all just judges, but at the same time, coming from very different places, very different parts of the state. Talk about how those conversations go.
Well, let's say, for example, we have meetings every month.
Okay.
So, maybe downstate there might be an issue that was raised with maybe a court interpreters. Let's say, for example, there's an issue with, we might say, well, how can we address that issue? Make sure, maybe upstate there's an issue with court officers, right? So people bring to bear their, again, the experiences, what's happening in their local districts, and then we have an opportunity to talk amongst each other and see how we can address it. So that's what we do, and we see where there might be a need. Maybe we need more family court judges. Mm-hmm. Let's do a program about that. Upstate New York, you'll see that there's a lack of diversity in our judges, especially. I mean, we might have city court judges, but maybe Supreme Court judges, maybe appellate division judges. We may have a lack of diversity. How can we address that? Maybe we need to do a program. And so we've done how to become a judge. We've done that in Buffalo. We've done it in Syracuse. We've done it in Rochester, in Albany. Again, because these are areas where we saw that there's a need, right? Downstate, we saw, well, how do you become a family court judge? In New York City, it's an appointment, whereas upstate, it's elected.
That's right, okay.
So, well, how do you navigate that appointment process? So we did a program so that individuals who are interested in becoming a New York City family court judge would learn about the appointment process, how that works. So around the table, it's really where are the issues and how can we address that? And as I mentioned earlier, we saw that we needed more diversity. Let's do a judicial mentor program. And how do we go about doing that to make sure that we're connecting people with judges so that they can learn from them? So that's a conversation, is really how to bring about solutions
right.
to the concerns that are being raised.
You also mentioned how the commission is also working with law students, or trying to help encourage others to go into the legal field. What about the diversity there? Are we seeing? Is there? I mean, does the New York State bar reflect the New York State population?
I think we need to do better,
okay.
Definitely. And I think we've been seeing a decrease in the number of Black male students. Decrease attending law schools. So how can we address the lack, it seems to be a decrease in the number of, young Black male students who are attending law schools. So these are kinds of things that we've talked about. And maybe, again, what are some of the barriers? I think earlier you mentioned about, well, what are some of the things might be barriers to people advancing, young people who are law students advancing through law school? So we've done a program about those kinds of issues. Is it the bar? How do we get about that? What are the pipeline programs that could help young people? A lot of people take themselves out of the equation. They don't even take the LSAT, or they don't, say they could even do that. So what we try to do is go into the high schools and say, it's possible. Right? I'm an attorney, we'll say, okay, this person's an attorney. We were there, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. You can do it too. And one of the sayings is, if you could see it, you can be it, right?
Okay.
So if you could see someone like you who, has accomplished and become an attorney, you can as well. There's no difference between you and I. You can do it as well. And I think that gives young people the encouragement, the incentive to say, look, I can also do that. And so they see someone as a mentor, right, as a role model. So we do that as well, so that we make it possible. Because sometimes people don't even think it's possible to do that. So by doing so, we tell them, here are the steps that you would need to take in order to pursue this path towards, the legal profession. And it makes it all that more attainable.
Just curious, you're right here in front of me, and I've heard you speak eloquently here for the last hour, Mary Lynn. But what about for you then? Your journey into the legal field. Did you see someone that made you think that you could do this, or did it come from another place?
I think, yes, I did. I saw, Thurgood Marshall.
Nice.
I saw Constance Baker Motley. I saw Martin Luther King. I was born, 2 weeks after his assassination. So I knew that it was possible. I saw these, larger than life individuals that were doing this and were saying that, we all are equal. Right? We all can, achieve that American dream, right? Whatever it is that we want to do, we can. As long as we put our mind to it, we put that hard work behind it, we can do it. And I also came from a family of immigrants who realized the importance of education. So with that, with my parents saying, look, education is important, and with those role models saying, look, you can achieve whatever it is that you want. I decided I wanted to become an attorney. And again, I had that support, but I also had someone that I could look up to, right? And I knew that that was something that I could achieve as long as I worked hard.
And I appreciate all the different topics that we've been able to touch in this hour. But as we're winding down here, maybe a thought to our listening audience about what the conversation should be like when it comes to the law and racial justice. What should, people who are taking something away from this conversation here, and we've been talking about Franklin H. Williams, but what about what should be inside those conversations when it comes to the legal system and racial justice?
I think, the first part is respect and dignity, right? Everyone should be treated with respect and dignity. Anyone who comes through the courthouse doors, anyone who is working within the court system is entitled to be treated with respect and dignity. So that's one conversation that's very important. One of the things that the Franklin Commission did is we created what's called court user expectation and responsibility signage so that everyone who enters the courthouse can read a sign and it says, this is how you are to be treated, because a lot of the issues are with the treatment of individuals of color, maybe of people who are impoverished, how they are treated by the court system, so they perceive the court system to be unjust. So, the treatment of individuals is very important. Also, what is the goal? The goal is to make sure that we have fair decisions, right? We are imparting fair decisions. So again, how do we get to that? In order to get to that, we need different perspectives, right? In order to achieve justice that will, again, be recognized by all. And I think that perception is very important, the perception of justice.
Our guest has been Mary Lynn Nicolas-Brewster, Executive Director of the Franklin H. Williams Judicial Commission. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
This has been What's Next on WBFO and WBFO HD1 Buffalo, WOLN Olean, and WUBJ Jamestown, your NPR station.